Hello? Yeah, okay. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Monday's NITheCS Colloquium. I'm Graham Pleasant. So unfortunately, Francesco, who usually introduces these colloquia, couldn't be here this afternoon. So I'm standing in on his behalf. So I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, who is Dr. William Vambe from Sisulu University. And he's giving a talk entitled Coding Our Now and Future, Africa's Voice, Values and Vision in AI.
They ask uncomfortable questions. So based on that, because I've put a disclaimer, let me start with my first question. Who is that guy? Anyone to assist me in terms of trying to dissect this? Who is this guy, or who are these guys? Yes. Jesus, yes. Jesus, which is Jesus Christ, right? Okay, thank you. I like that one. Any other? Okay, yes. The Messiah, yes. Can you give me these presents from Brazil? So give them one each. Yes. So thank you so much for those answers. I like them. And okay. Then it means they help me to start my conversation or my discussion. In actual fact, these guys is Brian Deacon and Robert Powell, right? So every church that you go to, especially today, I'm a Catholic. For those who are Christians, I'm a Catholic. And I grew up seeing these pictures whenever I visit church, right? And in most cases, even on WhatsApp messages, as we are going towards Christmas, they will send to you and then they say, forward this message. If you don't forward it, you are not going to get blessings. I think some of you or most of you as Africans, you have received some of these pictures or if you have received some of these messages, right? And I like it because what is it that I want to put across? Someone who holds data controls everything, isn't it? Because so it requires us to then rechange our mindset, because I was having another argument with my brother. He sent me these pictures and then he said it's Jesus Christ. And I was disagreeing. And when I was disagreeing, he started labeling me to then say, you're no longer a Christian. Why are you attacking Jesus? Right? Because that's the narrative that we grew up, or we were told that this guy or these guys. But in actual fact, from today onwards, you now know that this one is Brian Deacon and Robert Powell. If you check these ones, it's already available even on the internet. Another point that I also want to share with you as Africans. Even today, when you say, let me Google the map of 7 continents of the world, in most cases, it comes like this one. And in other instances, there are situations or times when you realize that even the map of Africa is even very small, right? But is it true that Africa is the smallest continent? If you are looking, especially in most of these images, in most cases, the African continent, they label it or they make it look smaller than it is. Another fact or another thing that I want you to realize today, based on who analyze it, the information and so forth, if you are just to do a Google check, you realize that in actual fact, Africa is the second biggest continent, right? After Asia, then there's Africa, then there's Europe, and going downwards. And in terms of measurements, in terms of kilometers and so forth, it depends with whose text are you reading, right? Others, they even say even better, more numbers there from 29 million, they even put even to 30 and so forth, depending on how they are reading. Are they reading also the ground, the ground and the oceans and so forth, as far as that is concerned, depending on whose narrative it is, right? So it's another point that I also want to share with you to then say, when I was growing up, it's only recently when I was even further reading to then when I realized that no, in actual fact, this map was not drawn correctly from my understanding or from my analysis based on numbers, because they say numbers don't lie, right? So you and me, we can agree that that's where we also need to start to ask questions. You and me, I think we need to, since it's a discussion, I think we need to redraw this map and representing things as they look like. Because otherwise, if we leave them the way Africa is depicted in those images, it will seem that it is a very small continent, of which, like I said, is only the second biggest continent. It then leads to my other question to then say, if it is the second biggest continent, why is it we think that we don't have data in terms of data collection or in terms of training things? Okay, so I wanted to start with that that way of provoking your thinking, and so that I prepare you in terms of the discussion that we want to make today. So coding our now and future, Africa voice, values, vision in AI. If you are not very, very, very careful in terms of taking part, we are going to then think that that guy is Jesus or Jesus, right? We are going to think that Africa is a small continent and it does not matter. In actual fact, it's only number 2. So Africa must shape its AI future through its own voice, values, and mission. And today I want to provoke your thinking. I want to challenge you as the young people to then say, you and me, we need to play a pivotal role in this development of AI. I did it intentionally to say coding our now, because there's a narrative that is also being pushed to then say, let's talk about the future. But if we are going to talk about the future, even tomorrow it will be the future. 10 years down the line, we'll be saying the future. It means we are going to continuously be brainstormed, brainwashed somewhere, because we are waiting for the future that will never come. So you and me, we need to start talking about now as the young generation, right? We need to change things now, because there's no future if the now is messed around and if the now is the information is distorted one way or the other. And someone with holding the data, like I said, does have power in doing that. So you will notice almost everyone is talking about AI. And AI is not just a tool, it's a reflection of who builds it. Like that picture that I showed you. It depends who told you that that guy was Jesus Christ. And at one point in time, I had a discussion with my mother and my father, and I was even arguing to then say, why are you telling me that I need to worship these pictures? Why are you telling me that in the churches that I are going, since I'm a Catholic, there's nothing wrong about Catholic, but since I'm a Catholic, why is it that you are telling me that this is Jesus? Do you want me to pass it to my young son to then say this picture is Jesus Christ? Who knows Jesus Christ? Is that picture correct? You and me, I think as of now, as of today, not the future, we can disagree. We can then say that is not Jesus Christ. So my point being, the now and future of AI belongs to us. And AI solutions and innovations for Africa, I was even also attending BRICS, and I was sharing the same message to then say must be developed by the people of Africa or for BRICS, for the people of Africa, with the people, with our data, and rooted in context and tailored for our challenges, ensuring relevance and sovereignty. Because AI sovereignty starts with building systems that reflect who we are, our people, our context, and our data. That's my argument. And I think at the end of the day, after this discussion, we want to then have an understanding what you think. And it's also good to disagree with what I'm saying. And it's also true. It's also good. So at the BRICS summit, we were talking about artificial intelligence for societal solutions. How can emerging technologies improve the lives of citizens in the BRICS countries, also even the African countries? And I was pushing another different talk, asking different questions or difficult questions that some might not feel comfortable in hearing those questions, to then say most of the AI tools that exist right now, most of them, based on if I'm to quantify based on the ones that I've used, out of 10, only maybe 1 or 2, they communicate to me or they talk to me. Those smartwatches that you use and so forth, some of the things, they don't talk to you directly because they were trained using someone's data or data that does not reflect us. We are going to dwell much on that one and look at what we mean. So there's a question that I always ask myself, and I also want to make another disclaimer to then say I've been SRB, which is an abbreviation, strong rural background. I was born and raised in the rural areas, right? And it is from those rural areas when I started to ask, even right now, where was AI invented? Some might then be quick and say Europe. I don't want to disagree with them, but I don't want also to agree with them. But my point is, when I was growing in the rural areas back then, we used to see or we used to create something like that, which used to scare birds, which you call a scarecrow, right? Birds, be it monkeys and so forth, that want to come and eat our maize. And for me, at that point in time, when I'm now reflecting backwards, I'm saying that was a robot. Maybe I might not have a correct definition by then, but I think back then we were creating robots. And I also know that at that point in time, we're even creating, we then create something that we would then use wind, then the stone will be beating that one and making some noise so that if monkeys are coming to eat our food, they might think that there's an individual there. So I'm simply saying at that point in time, when I reflect back, even now, when I ask myself questions, I simply say we were having robots back then, and our ancestors or our grandfathers, they had that wisdom of robots. Then the question that then I ask is then say, why is it we ended up being there only without advancing? Maybe, and maybe, that's where you and me, we also need to take part to then say they were doing things, maybe not giving them names back then, or they were giving them names, but they were Shona names, they were Xhosa names, and those Xhosa names, Shona names, Zulu names, and so forth. Maybe we have another word when you say AI to them. When I was asking my grandfather, he was even giving these things a name, which I think might be equivalent to a robot, because a robot, it also works with AI. So I like one guy, one professor, Chakanetsa Mavunga, who is he's an African, but he's based at MIT in America. When he wrote his book, say, How to Invent the Future, and he said, it is Africa, the problem of Africa poverty, that besides the minerals it exports raw, it is rich in critical thinkers, but sometimes they are not doers. And those who are doers, maybe they are not critical thinkers. So there's a need of those who are critical thinkers and those that are doers to marry to one another. And at the end, we might have redefined the history to then say AI started in Africa. There are many examples that I can give you based on my rural background. And some of you I think you know. When I was even growing up also, I want to just give another last example as far as why I say sometimes AI in terms of even the prediction started from from Africa. Growing up, if you see two birds or two hens fighting, my grandfather or my grandmother would tell you, please put water on the stove, and when you are cooking, cook more food because we are going to have visitors. By merely looking at two birds, two hens fighting, and several times, let me say 99.9%, when those things happened, in actual fact, we ended up receiving visitors. So I'm simply saying it was 0.0001 probability when the things that they were saying was not true. What were they doing somewhere? I'm in my thinking now that I now know certain things, I'm also saying maybe they were also using AI somehow in terms of predicting, using things to foretell certain things before they happen. They might even tell you by merely looking at a tree to then say, this season we are going to have a lot of rainfall, right? And eventually we have a lot of rainfall. By merely looking at the tree, they will tell you certain things. So I'm simply saying when they were doing that, they were training certain things, there's certain data that I think even sometimes even the science that we rely much on, sometimes it misses a lot of things, especially today and this age, climate change. There's a lot of things, but back then I knew when my grandfather said something, it was going to happen. So that for me, I can conclude then say AI started in Africa. That's my submission. And you are also allowed to disagree with me. It's also fine. Okay, so why this conversation matters? You realize, like what I said, if you just go Google that I want a picture of Jesus, automatically you're going to get those pictures of those two guys that I highlighted earlier on. Is it true? For me, I think there's an element of bias. Why is it by mistake? Why is it it's not picking another picture, maybe of me, and label me as Jesus, right? Why those two people? It means it has been trained somewhere when people are searching, they are getting that picture. So while this conversation matters, I want to just play a video, then we proceed so that you can also reflect and digest the things that I've shared with you in the last few minutes, then we proceed. Yes. Okay, just a minute. So yes, I have a lot of stories, from the rural areas, and I don't want to to tell you many of them, but obviously they are going to talk in terms of yes, why this conversation matters. Let's have a look.
Object identified. Truck. Tracking object. Truck. Follow mode active.
Good morning. Happy Independence Day.
Not in South Africa.
Thank you. So when you see some of these things, it means you see that self-driven car. If you are going to take it as it is and bring it here, based on the algorithms, they now say the other algorithms that learn things happen and so forth. But it's bound to face some challenges because the data that was used, maybe there are no those donkeys carrying those things, and it's likely going to say it's a truck. There's a danger because there's a narrative that's we're told that self-driven cars are the safest one. Maybe they might be the safest where they are or where they were trained, but I don't think in the context of Africa they are. And I'm going to prove why am I saying so. The last image I wanted to attend to do those English English language test. As Africans, we have a way of pronouncing words in our context. So there was a word that I was given because I was using AI, or I was doing that test on a computer. It was saying it's wrong. Then I say, why is it saying it's wrong? Why? Because maybe the system that was designed, the way they pronounce because, and the way that I pronounce because as an African might be completely different. So am I going to fail an exam if I know how to spell that same word? Maybe the pronunciation is not because it's wrong. It's wrong in the people who created it. They made it to behave another way, but I have my own way. But at the end of the day, if we are to write it, we are going to write the same. So that's the concept that I'm highlighting as bias. So do you think a student in the rural areas or in Africa, if he gets some of these devices, is going to be successful in terms of doing or using them? You can see that child is even confused, even though we are saying we are moving with education 5.0, let them use technology. Are you not disadvantaging them if you are simply taking a shoe that was fitting in another context and you want the student to fit that same shoe without any problems? I'm leaving there for you to think. But I'm simply saying you and me, we need to play a part in this, and we want our voice to be heard. If I pronounce a word as an African to say because or temperature, even here in South Africa, I also noted if you want to say 1, 2, 3, you don't say 3, you say 3 sometimes, right? 1, 2, 3, right? Is it wrong? It's not wrong, because when we say let's write the word or the number, it is the same. I mean, I say 1, 2, 3, right? So I'm simply saying if the system that is going to be used is trained somewhere, it means either me or you are going to fail when we reach 83. Because 1, 2, 3, someone is saying 1, 2, 3, right? So there's that bias that can come with that part. And I want you to think about that. So for me, this conversation, this discussion, it matters a lot because AI is shaping the now. And I want to remove the word, I'm starting with the now because many wants to use AI is shaping the future. And even in the higher education institutions, where even at some universities, they're even discussing, can we adopt AI and that and that and that and that. It means if you are disadvantaged now, what makes you think that you are going to be better tomorrow if your now is also was not shaped well? So AI is shaping the now and future, the health, the education, agriculture, finance, and many. And like what I said, we're the second biggest continent. We need to also remember that. So yet most AI is not built for, by, or with Africans. Our data, our values, our culture. The young brother of my father, if it's English, it's uncle, right? I'm not an expert in English, so forgive me, right? It's uncle, isn't it? But in my culture, if you say the young brother of your mother, of your father is uncle, then the brother of your mother is also an uncle, isn't it? So is there a difference? There's no difference, isn't it? But in the African context, it means a lot. The young brother of my father, depending with the language, others they call Babam Kulu, Babamkuru in Shona, in Babamkuru in other languages, right? Baba, which means father, is the father. Then the young brother, the brother of your mother is Sekuru, right? Or uncle, if you are to put in English. So there's a clear distinction between these two. But if you are to run somehow, in terms of the English, when you're using English and you're teaching our young kids about that, somehow they are losing their value as African that we value. My young brother, if my son sees my young brother, it's father in the African context. We don't have that cousin, extended family, and so forth. In the African context, we don't have something that is called extended family. So if an AI model is trained to then say, if I'm now asking the students who are learning, then they punch that I want to know the young brother of my father, it says uncle. And obviously, depending on where you are, if I'm the one who is marking, I'm going to mark that wrong because to me, it is not correct. It might look unfair, but to me, it's not correct because it removes that value that we have in the African context. That's why I'm saying Africans, we are very rich in terms of but sometimes we look down upon ourselves as far as that one. So AI, when we are developing now a system that is going to do that in the education context, for example, we need to, if someone searches for that, it needs to give this student a correct answer that reflects our values, that reflects our voice, that reflects our culture. That's my submission. So there's a major representation gap in data design and development. It means either in Google or if you're using these AI tools, if you ask them, especially this generation Z and Alpha, they are now using technology a lot. And I'm worried a lot because we are going to lose them more because they are going to adopt certain cultures, certain values that they don't even understand. So when I'm telling them that this is my brother, they will tell me, no, it's an extended family. But it's my brother. Why are you saying it's an extended family? Because they see this narrative somewhere. And according to them, they are correct because they are looking at a certain. So these things, in other words, we are simply saying there's a bias somewhere, somehow, according to my definition. There's a bias because when they are searching, they are not getting the voice of the African context. So that we need to bridge that representation gap because without African leadership in AI, we risk importing problems instead of creating solutions. So it's not a one shoe size fits all. We need to think about it. We need to think a little bit deeper, ask questions. And I'm always saying, or I always argue to then say, one way or the other, we're wired a little bit wrongly. And the one speaker once said, the literate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read and write, but are those who cannot learn and relearn. And I'm challenging the whoever to then say, we need to have the ability to unlearn things that we've learned. The data that we have given, we're fed. We need to unlearn that data and learn the new things, like that picture that I'm always referring to then say, today you need to unlearn and argue to say, that's not Jesus Christ. There are those two guys that we highlighted. So Africans and African leadership and our leaders, they need not to be invited on the table. They need to be part of the table when we are making decisions, policies to do with AI. Otherwise, we are going to lose our voice in these systems. We are just going to adopt them. Then they create a lot of problems, for us. I'm going to share with you some what are the risks of exclusion. When Africa isn't represented in AI systems, health tools misdiagnose our bodies. I think you and me, we can agree during COVID-19 is just an example. There was a narrative that was being pushed based on the models that they've used to then say, when this COVID-19 goes to Africa, they're going to perish, they're going to die. That was the narrative. Maybe I missed it, or when I was reading, that's what I got. Because can we blame them? No. because the model that they used, they were trained that model AI using the data. Maybe for me, I can then say it was using the European data sets, right? But when it came to Africa, I think it shocked a lot of people because we didn't die. Why? Because I think our genes, how our bodies are designed, they were fighting that virus. I believe it was there. I'm also, I believe in science also, right? Even though others were saying otherwise, but I believe it was there, right? So if we had trained that model using our data sets, we're going to have a completely different approach in dealing with the virus. But the problem that we did is, in most cases, we just adopted the systems as they are. We used that model in terms of saying things to then say, let's do this and let's do this. And we fast-tracked to do certain things that we don't even understand because they were trained using models. They were using certain models to predict, to then say, during this time of the year, climate conditions are like this and so forth. But when it came down this side, it completely failed. And I think you and me, we can agree or disagree on that. But I strongly believe that the models failed a lot, and it failed us. And we don't blame anyone. I think at this point in time, we blame ourselves, you and me, because we wanted just solutions without creating our models that predicts certain things. Then in the EdTech, can't teach in our own languages. Many times we are judged based on how well we speak English. Personally, even where I am, I still struggle with English. But does it mean I'm daft? No, doesn't mean that. That's the other part, I think, that I was even commenting the Chinese, for example, to then say they use their language, they learn their technology using their language, and even a small Chinese guy can do certain things. Are we going to penalize them based on the English? No, they're even doing things better. So I'm simply saying the AI models that are going to train, they should be able to speak Sisulu also very well. And it also raises another point that I want to raise. In my discussion or in my group or in my department, I asked to then say, what is climate change in our language? Then one of my colleagues says, no, using this also, what is climate change? Then he said, please, can you just use AI, just go and check on AI. I did, he assisted me to do that because it was a question that I was asking. So he did for me, and I'm grateful. But the answers that he gave me, there was another discussion now. The also speaking people, they were even arguing to say the words that are appearing there, they are not the ones that describe climate change. I'm just giving an example. How do we describe artificial intelligence in our own language? If you go there on any, they might even give you a also word that means something. But that word, if you talk or if you say it where they are elders, it might even offend them because it has a different meaning to what you are saying. I remember the other time when I was talking about fourth industrial revolution with my grandfather. As soon as I said revolution, according to him, it means something. It means war. And and to him it was because he saw some of these fights. And to me, I was jokingly saying these things, and to him it means war. So are we going to agree at the end of the day with him because that word means something? I'm simply highlighting the power of language, the power of words. So if AI models are not trained with that one, there's another silly example that I wanted to highlight, but in my language now, it's a vulgar word, but here it is used for a certain pastor, right? They said there's another pastor that they use who is popular, but in my Shona language, I cannot even speak it. I cannot even say it even publicly. Even right now, I cannot even talk about it because it's a vulgar language. So one of these days when I was watching news, they were pronouncing it the way that they were pronouncing it nicely without getting offended. And my parents were there. What is it that I did? I simply took the remote and I switched off the TV because it means something, right? So the power of language, when we are creating these AI models, we need to pay attention. And who is going to do that? Not me who is speaking another language. I'm not supposed to come and maybe I speak Xhosa, for example, then you speak Sisulu. Should I be the one who is in front to do that? No, you need to be in front because you know the meaning of these words and how they mean. So when you're creating an AI model, it should communicate to you. So the ability to contextualize some of these things, because otherwise we are going to, in our culture, if you say words that are vulgar and so forth, you pay the price if they are elders and so forth. So we are going to pay a lot of money, a lot of things to our parents because they will feel that we've offended them. We have looked down upon them, but we are simply using AI. So can you say, I'm just using AI, why are you blaming me? You take responsibility because ignorance does not have defense in the African culture. Then agritech misreads African soil and climate. That example that I gave you. Then so there are many cases when we're told by scientists, I'm not saying scientists are wrong, but we're told by scientists that this year you are going to have a bumper harvest, there's going to be a lot of water. Yes, we use these models and so forth. Where were these models created? That's my question. Most of them, they were not created in Africa. They were not fed using the African context data. And as a result, they might tell you that we are going to have a lot of rainfall based on the temperature conditions, that based on their where that data was coming from, they might work perfectly well there, but in our context, they might not work very well. So we need to be careful because many small-scale order farmers, they were misled by some of these weather forecasts that we see on TV. I can give a silly example. When I was in Alice, University of Fort Hare there, so that Alice, there is Butterworth. When they are giving weather forecast, they simply say the weather in Alice is going to be like that. So I was staying this side at our field or at a certain field. Rain did not rain there. There was no rain there. But just a stone throw away or just 2 kilometers, there was rain that was raining there. So, but they told us that it's going to rain. But my grandfather, they told me, or the people, the elderly, they told us that this rain is not going to reach here. So even though we're in the same context or same area, this rain is going to not reach there because you can see this tree, the way that it's behaving, and the trees that are there, they're completely different. So I'm simply saying when we are creating those contextualize based on the areas that we are, the AI models that we are creating, be it robots and so forth, everything. Otherwise, we are going to, there's this thing that is climate change. Almost everyone is pushing climate change. And is it the same with the European or these other the Asian and so forth? It's different. But when they go and gather, they gather talking about as if they are talking about one thing that is affecting us. Yes, climate change is there. As a scientist, I also believe that. But when you are creating solutions, they should not be imported solutions. You and me, we need to take part so that we address. So this isn't just a tech gap, it's a data and dignity gap. That's how I see it. Data and dignity gap. Are you telling me that as a second biggest continent, we don't have enough data to train our thing? Then I think on that map, I think Europe is the third or the fourth. Why are we over relying on a continent that has even little data and then not pay attention to our data? I'm not against Europe. I love Europe because I even went there to do even part of my studies. I appreciate that, but we need to think again to then say when we are taking things, let's not take them out of context. So when Africa is absent from the data, the systems built on that data will fail us. And I'm giving you silly and simple examples, but if you think deeper, I think you see where I'm coming from and where my discussion is. I have a personal story why sometimes, or many times, you guys in the rural areas, sorry to always give you the rural area context because those guys, sometimes they are looked down upon, but they are very rich. That's my understanding in terms of certain things, right? So in the rural areas, the elders, when they look at a pregnant woman, for example, they can even tell you that without any doubt, they will tell you that these are twins, and it's a boy and it's a girl, by merely looking at the person, isn't it? Then you go, you then go as a lady, for example, you go to the hospital, they will tell you that no, we only see one person. There are instances like that. I think ladies, some can also confirm when they were told that it's a boy, they did all those other preparations, thinking that it's a boy, others buying a lot of things to only be disappointed at the end when they were told that when they gave birth, then the child was a girl, isn't it? And they were using systems, right? AI to do diagnosis and so forth. That's misdiagnosis. I'm not saying science is bad, but I'm simply saying let's not demonize our ways of doing things and say that data is useless. I'm simply saying we need to marry the two, maybe somehow, right? So the example that I want to give you is my son was then, I was told when he was, I think 2 years somewhere, that there is he has symptoms of autism. And me being me, with my SRB strong raw background, I said, no, don't worry. But my other colleague now, my wife, then she was panicking. And we were even told to go to a speech therapist and so forth and so forth. And obviously there was a lot of money involved. And my pocket was going to die because of that, right? But because I'm an African, when I dig deeper in the data that I have about genealogy, I asked my father, my grandfather. I was privileged enough to have grandfathers whom I would sit with. They told me, no, in our family, we don't speak even up to 3 years, sometimes even 4 years. And there's no problem about that. That's how we are. So am I going to use, I'm not blaming the doctors, because the doctors, when they were using some of the books that they use, when they are reading symptoms, most of them, the data that they are reading, it might not be African, where they are getting that their data, their knowledge based on that. So they were correct. And I paid dearly when they said autism, when I consulted them. Then I said, no, I'm not going to do that. When we visited the rural areas, my grandfather, he just looked and said, no, you guy, it's because you were not coming to our rural areas. And those things happened. The ancestors were trying to talk to the boy. And the boy started talking. Miraculously, if you want to put it that way, in the context of Christianity. But is it a miracle? No. I'm simply saying there is certain data that I didn't know, that our elders knew, and even the systems that they were using to diagnose, they failed us, and they failed us dismally. So diagnosis due to delayed speech, but insight imported diagnostic tools don't fit our lived realities. I gave you another even example of COVID and so forth. I'm not against science. I'm one person who loves science and also follow it. So cultural context and lived experience can challenge and correct AI-driven assumptions. That's the point that I just want to make there. Don't quote me wrong, please. Okay, so most current AI models are not trained on, as a point, when we are talking about African reality check, African languages and dialects. I love Prof. Vusi Marivet from, I think he's from University of Pretoria. He's one guy who is spearheading to say, let's have AI models that also understand our language, because our language means a lot, especially in this kind of revolution that we're talking about. So African languages and dialects, our AI models, most of them, they need to be created or to be trained with that. Then indigenous health patterns, we can tell you, I can tell you several stories about indigenous health patterns that we might not understand when they say eczema. Is it eczema? Right? Then you said, we were then told then about my son, we were then told to buy other medication and so forth and so forth. But when I then visited, and it took almost 2 to 3 years buying all those expensive medication for that condition. But when I visited one of my my grandmother, they told me, no, since you stay close to the sea, just go with the boy in the sea, right? Just take that water and make him bath with that water. That eczema will disappear. Shockingly as it is, I did that. I'm not saying it is going to work in your context, because remember, we might be different, right? Context matters. I bathed him with that, then he was healed of that eczema with the sea water. So I'm simply saying, when we are going to use some of these in the health, we also need to understand the indigenous patterns, understand where we come from, right? And understand our values, understanding our as Africans and so forth. Your time flies. Okay, so local educational content, I think I highlighted that one. Informal economics and mobile finance systems, I think most of you, when you're applying for bank loans and so forth, based on the data that you feed, sometimes you might even be rejected to get what you get, the loan and so forth, based on the data. But is it correct? You might be even richer than the person that they give that loan, but maybe you don't know how to, the data that you are using. Maybe you're just a simple farmer, you don't have these other things, but you might be rich. I'm just giving an example. Then say, in the informal economics and mobile finance systems, when we are also creating these AI, almost everything is using AI. When we are creating this AI, we need to factor in that traditional knowledge in agriculture. So if we don't train AI models on our realities, it will never truly work for us. That's a point. That's my submission that I'm making. So what is our vision? Built with us, we need AI that is built with us, by us, for us, and rooted in our cultures, values, and lived experience. It's a fact, and designed to solve African problems in an African way, these AI models. And the AI we need must be rooted in African challenges, cultures, and solutions, not adapted as a afterthought, like what we are then invited to sit on. Let's do AI, come and let's talk about it. In actual fact, I think we're supposed to be ones who are calling people, because we invented this AI and these robots long back before others gave it that word. What we must do? Curate African-owned data sets. So you and me, in the small corner where you are, create technological solutions that are trained with the data, and that's how I think we are going to win. Train local AI talent with ethics-based mindset. I think ethics, we've been talking about that one. Build resilient AI infrastructure. We have my good professor, is a quantum physics, professor. So we have talent with it. Even I think some of the people who are leading in Google and so forth, they're African. So it's not a matter of us not having talent. We have a lot of talent in Africa. So we need to then build that one. Then embed values, equity, dignity, and participation in that part. And oral histories, rituals, remedies, and proverbs, and structured data, I believe is God. So obviously, we were told to demonize the concept of our ancestors. So my grandfather, when we are talking about him now, others might say it's a demon, or the spirit of him is the one that is leading you to do this because he's a demon, right? Is it true in the African context? It's not. But maybe if you go to this Christianity and if you adopt it, taking everything without applying your mind, therefore getting your mind back home and just go there without doing critical thinking, it means you might then say your great-grandfather is a demon. So we need to, oral histories, we need to consult our traditional healers, to consult our elders. In there's a situation where, in African context, if someone grows very old, we tend to label them as witches. Why is it still alive? Is it living at 100 years or 99? But if it's the other way, we celebrate if they reach 117, 120 years. We celebrate years they've been kept, they've been held. But ours, we don't. So let's go back to our oral histories. Let's capture that data that we do have. We must digitize, validate, and protect it, and feed it into our models to gain insight that foreign data sets miss. And our culture, language, and ancestral knowledge are powerful data sources if we choose to preserve and use them. So there are a lot of opportunities that we have that I had. So I'm challenging you today, you and me. I think I tried to provoke your thinking provoke certain things that we might not want to agree. So we don't have to play push up. We can lead, and Africa is young, connected, and creative. If we build AI with our data and vision, we will protect our sovereignty, drive inclusive development, and shape the global AI agenda. Because Africa is the chance to leap ahead, not by copying others, but by creating original, meaningful AI solutions. So my final thought, the question that I want to then ask to you, Africa doesn't just need AI. I'm submitting that AI needs also Africa. So questions to the audience, how can we collaborate to build that African-led AI? In the small corner where you are, the data that you are producing, when you are visiting your grandfathers, grandmothers, are you collecting that data? Or are we also building what we want at the end? What stories, data, or solutions are you bringing to the table? So it's no longer a matter of what the country is going to do for you. It's a matter of what are you going to do for the country, especially in this revolution of AI. You and me, we need to take part in that part. So with my ways to contribute, share your local stories and data, like what were highlighted. So me and my colleagues, we also highlighted the element of we're trying to also come up with solutions that do TB AI diagnostic, because we realize that even radiologists, I think there are 650 registered radiologists as per 2023 research. And we noted that South Africa is almost 62 million. So imagine 62 million being serviced with 650 radiologists, registered radiologists, if I had to use those numbers. So hypothetically, you notice that it's almost one radiologist is saving a lot of things. So am I saying AI is wrong? No, AI is correct. So it can, instead of substituting people, it can also help those radiologists. So we're trying to create, or we created, or it's another thing that we're trying to do, because the ones that we see, they were developed or using several data sets, but these data sets are not from Africa. So we wanted to train these models using also our own data, so that it can also be able to predict, especially for the rural areas. They are the ones that most radiologists don't want to even stay in those hospitals. So can they die? No. So let's do something about it, you and me, in terms of developing, but developing using our data sets, right? So we need to take part in science. Then if we are to ask you, how many vaccines have you taken up to date, or what are you allergic to, and so forth? When you were born, that's where our problem even started. But we created a lot of data from the day when we were born. What are you doing with that data as an individual? Last time you were having flu, you took something, and so forth. So we are simply saying, if we are to use AI, we are developing mobile applications. So with my colleagues, we developed a health diary, whereby from as soon as you are born, you start feeding your information there, right? And other traditional, other information. Then this one, we want to collect that data. Then we can be able even to foretell to then say, 10 years down the line, you might suffer in these diseases and so forth. Those not the stopwatches that or the smartwatches that you are using, because some of them, I used to have one with me, but it was now even giving me more stress than before, because the things that it was saying, personally, I don't believe it, because there are things that it was reading which I think up to now that it was using wrong data, or the data that was trained with is not correct. So we created the mobile application that also have use both English and local language, so that we cater for the people. Then we also have another part that we want to do. Climate adapt farm-wise AI is another solution. That example that I gave you about where you are, even in East London, where I stay in Beacon Bay, they will just tell you that in East London, the weather is going to be like that one. But last week, where I stay, it was very cold. The other side of East London, just a few kilometers away, 3 kilometers, it was even hot. So decisions that we are going to make, we also need to create tools for farmers, small-scale farmers, because climate change is real. But we need to give them informed decisions. And whilst we are doing that in this system that we are creating, we also advocating that they also put their indigenous knowledge. Then we marry indigenous knowledge and the science. we marry together, then we use AI because we now know certain things. We use AI, then we can create a model that speaks to us with our data and so forth. In conclusion, I'm simply saying, quoting Prof. Lumumba, African problems that require technology will not be solved by theology. You and me, it's high time where we need to also take part. Technology is here to stay. There's nothing wrong about technology. There's nothing wrong about AI. But the things that I have highlighted to you, in raw areas, they say whenever you see a cheetah facing another animal, you also need to run. Wisdom. Why? Because what if a cheetah eats something that it is chasing? If it doesn't catch it, it is going to come for you. So likewise, technology is there. If you are not moving with technology, someone who is using technology is going to substitute you. So in conclusion, last time I always say, yes, technology is people are going to lose jobs. In the first industrial revolution, there were other people who lost jobs, but there were others that it also created jobs. So you and me, we need to have that ability to unlearn, relearn, and continuously learn so that we become relevant. Let's use AI even in education, wherever you go. Based on that, I rest my case. Thank you.
William, thank you very much for your talk. We really enjoyed it. Since you are a mathematician, so you're from the Department of Mathematics and Computing, what academic contribution has you made towards solving this problem?
Academic contribution. Yes, thank you very much. So we have written some papers about some of these things. I've talked about adopting, we need to have from dystopian to utopian view in terms of adopting some of these things we need to understand. But we've also presented some of this work in terms of the TBA diagnostic. We presented it in the African when we were trying to, there's another platform where we presented that. So we've done a lot about that one. But at the same time, I'm also challenging, or another perspective, as much as I'm an academic, I want to go against me chasing publications, even though I might be fired somehow. But because I'm just chasing citations. I'm one such person because I grew up in the raw areas. I want the technology to help people. So if technology is not helping people or solving people problems in the actual field, I might have done 1,000 publication or 1 million publication, but from my side, I think that does not have impact if it is just a publication there. So we have done a lot, and I'm trying to balance like what you are saying, like that question. So, but at the same time, I'm also looking for collaborations, mathematicians, so that we also marry and at the end come up with something that is also, then we transform it from just publications, then also to reality. Thank you. And I follow you a lot, and you inspire me.
Thank you very much. So speaking of indigenous knowledge and how we can integrate it, so where do we start for us to use that indigenous knowledge? Because I think I have a lot of stories similar to what you were saying, like, okay, if something is happening even on my body, I believe there's something or someone is gonna visit and so forth. So where do we start to put that knowledge somewhere where it can be used to train those models on an African perspective?
Thank you. The first part is to document. That's one of the reasons that why we are still lagging behind. Our grandfathers had a lot of wisdom, a lot of data, but when they die, the gravesite is even richer with a lot of unexplored data. So the first point, document everything that you get, or that the data that you have, because at the end, for these AI models to work, we need to train them on that data. So documentation, I think, should be the first step. Then we can then approach others. If you are strong in certain, you might be from the cultural point of view, you believe that one. Also approach a scientist, then also approach a computer scientist, then create. So the element of collaboration then also comes into play. Even in academics, we are all even also encouraged to then collaborate, because all these, they work together, come up with an AI model that speaks to us, by us, and for us. So documentation is very, very, very important. Thank you.
There. Thank you for the opportunity. That was a very good colloquium, I must say. You have mentioned that you would like to source African intelligence from rural areas, right? However, my question is, where do you get the funding to outsource that intelligence, whereas the people you want to outsource this intelligence from are merely looking for like basic civilization solutions? So how do you plan on approaching them and having like scientifically acceptable ways of outsourcing that intelligence? Because as you were saying, I noticed that scientifically we have symptoms. In African intelligence, we have indicators, whereas you say that the probability of an African, let's say an African statement of intelligence being manifested is a lot higher than a scientific one. So how do you work around the funding there to like have your elders give you that information and make sure that you were able to like find an efficient balance?
Okay, thank you. The question of funding, as soon as we start talking about funding, it might end up this demotivating you to go and look. So the point that I want to make is, in our small corners, if you go to the raw areas, you still have the elders. When you get that data, make it available to everyone. The problem I think that we also have in the African context is we are egocentric. If I get small data, I want to keep it to myself, right? So we need to have an open source kind of a data set whereby you collect your information, you share, you collect another information, we share, and so forth. And the concept of adoption, the reason why a lot of us, or a lot of rural people, which I value the most, are not adopting some of these things. Number one, these things are not talking to them in terms of language. If you talk English, there are some who cannot even speak English. I was in Brazil. There are areas where they don't even speak English. So we need to go back to our own languages, use our own languages. That's why I was even saying, when we are creating solutions, let's contextualize them for the people so that it speaks. Imagine you visit maybe one of your friends, maybe, for example, in America. Then you get there, he starts speaking with you in your language. He also prepares the food that you want to eat. You'll be very happy without even other things. Why? Because they valued you as an individual in that part. So let's create models that also language part, and at the same time, you and me, that's why that I said it's a challenge. Let's start from the small corners where we are. Then I think as a second population with a lot of people, imagine 54 countries, each and every one of us is playing a role. They are feeding that information somewhere. I believe even the data set that we are going to come up with is going to be high, better. Is it possible? Is it doable? Yes, because if it was not, there was no need for us to talk about it. So things that are challenging, personally, I like them because they help us to see things. Even those who went to the moon, they question and they said it's challenging. That's why I want to do it. So it's challenging. The talk is challenging. It might look as if it's not possible, but in our small corner, for me and my other team members, and those who are I normally visit in the raw areas, we are seeing those small changes. And some of them, they are happy because I'm coming back to where I was raised and offering them solutions that they relate to. And they will say, no, I know this boy was he was a headman. And it makes them easier. It makes it easier for them to adopt the solutions that I bring because it communicates to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the talk, and I thank you also for being very practical, because I mean we need practical solution. So in the context of my question, do you believe, I know that AI systems run on power, and so do you believe that there's a correlation between AI development in Africa and power development in Africa, or you think from the standpoint we can still develop AI solutions outside of the exponential increase in power?
Thank you very much. There is another power that we are not tapping into. We have a lot of sunlight, for example. As much as it might look as expensive, I'm agreeing with you that it also requires power. Where are we going to get power? I strongly believe that if we invest in even in solar, if we invest in the core and other things, the resources as an African continent, we have a lot of resources. I think it's a matter of mismanagement of these resources, whereby very few people, like what I said, we are egocentric. Very few people want to eat at the expense of a lot. So yes, we need to have a conversation because they also need power. Another point, whilst you're still there, the element of internet connectivity. It's also another thing. But I was speaking to another colleague. It's now even possible to create AI models that can work even also offline, with the idea of trying to address also that problem of high cost of internet connectivity. So there are a lot of factors that are going to be stumbling blocks. But you and me, if we, in our small corner, we do something about it, we can harvest a lot of solar power. I think there was a movie that I once watched, a boy developing a small thing and is saving even his community with the low resource things that does not even require more money, but is saving his community using solar. So I think that's another thing that it's high time where we don't think inside the box. Others, they then say think outside the box. But I'm one person who disagrees with them both. I believe in breaking the box so that we start to think, because as long as there's a box, if you go out there and face a little bit of challenge, you want to run back to the box. So let's break the box first. Then I think everything will be sorted. Thank you.
I think we have one more question at the front.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. At the beginning of your address, you mentioned colonial education. So I was wondering, do you approve of it as a foundation for AR?
Sorry, can you come again?
I just wondered about colonial education. Do you approve of it or not approve of it as a foundation for AR?
It does not have a one answer, depending on where you are taking it from. Are you taking it from the academic side of view? Are you also taking it from the cultural point of view? So it cannot be answered directly, but if I'm to take into the context of the academic side of view, yes, I can agree on that part. But if I'm to take on where I come from, the raw areas and so forth, I strongly disagree, because I believe that we have these things before the colonial thing, but it's only that how we're putting them. So it's just a matter of how you are now, which lenses are you wearing in terms of when you are making that discussion.
Okay. But I do agree about the indigenous languages. They should actually be part of AR, definitely. So I was wondering about multilingualism. You know, in the schooling that a child goes through, what language she's taught in or he's taught in surely will determine the use of her language once she gets to a higher level in terms of AR.
Yes, I agree. So it's now just a matter of which language are you when you're even doing multilingual. It's now a matter of the languages that you are picking. I've been in China. There are other people who cannot even speak English. But to them, when they create these AI models, they work for them based on their language because they are creating. So it's also a matter of context. Where do you envision yourself being? Where are you going to? So it also determines now, if you are going, for example, I was in Brazil. If you are there, if you only speak English and you don't speak Portuguese, but you speak English and these other languages, you are going to suffer when you are using these AI tools whilst you are there. So it's also a matter of, it requires wisdom to then say, where do I see myself into? Then it also determines also the languages that you are also going to learn. So I agree, we need to include as many languages as possible so that the solutions that we are creating can also solve a lot of problems. In the South African context, I think we have 18 or 14 languages, including the sign language, right? Somewhere there. So if you are going to create an AI model, who is your target market? What are the problems? Where do you want them to be solved? Then it will also inform the languages that you are also going to use. And the sign language community is also the other one. That is a lot of people, they forget when they're talking about this kind of AI systems. So we also need to include, to be inclusive. AI at the end, we want it to be inclusive, everyone, as long as you are in Africa, it needs to cater for you. Not only using English, maybe Portuguese or Xhosa only. It needs to cater for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, considering the time, I think we can end here. But so last but not least, let me just thank the speaker and also on behalf of NITheCS offer you this, I think it's like a popular maths magazine, so called Wisaku. So yeah, that's for you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, yes. And you reminded me to then say, when you ask people to then say who wants to do mathematics, no one raised their hand. But if you say want to become a data scientist, everyone wants to do AI. But behind that, there's mathematics. Yeah. So thank you. I will use it.
Thanks. Yeah. And yeah, for everybody in person, there should be drinks and snacks outside. So thanks, everybody.